Welcome to Impact Farming, where we introduce you to the people and ideas that will have a massive impact on your farming operation. Brought to you by Farm Marketer. Sit down, start the engine, and let's roll with today's show.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Impact Farming Show. Today, we have an amazing guest on our show. Welcome, Timothy Caulfield. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me on.
Good. And today is a super exciting day for you. Your book is launching.
That's right. Today. So
yes.
I am pretty thrilled about it. It always feels like this is a long process, so it is always great when the book comes out. It's still exciting for me for sure.
Excellent. So I'm not going to keep our audience in suspense much longer. I am going to give a little bit of your amazing bio, and then we're going to jump in and talk about your new book. So I'll do a little more suspense, and then we'll dive right into the book and share what the title is. So just so you guys know, if you don't already know who Timothy is, you probably recognize his face, but I'll share a little bit of his bio. Timothy is a professor of health, law, and science policy. He is the author of several books, and the one I love, and I seen you do a presentation on, is Gwyneth Paltrow Wrong About Everything. That's when I first met you, and that was a pretty amazing presentation. So I know you are also a speaker, as I mentioned, and you are the host and co-producer of a Netflix series called A User's Guide to Cheating Death. That's a pretty fantastic bio. So welcome again.
Thanks so much.
Good. And today we're talking about your new book, and I just love the title. I'm so lucky I've actually had the opportunity to read an advanced copy, and the book is amazing. But what really got me right off the hop was the title, Relax, Dammit, A User's Guide to the Age of Anxiety. So I'm super excited. Can you tell us a little bit more about who you are? And I'm curious, a lot of your books seem very passion-based, like very, I could tell you will have strong opinions and research behind it. Can you tell us a little bit about who you are, your work, what sets you on fire, and then we'll dive right into the book.
Yeah, for sure. And you're exactly right about that. I'm glad that comes across. I appreciate that comment because I do really feel passionate about the issues I tackle in my books. As part of my academic life, as part of my research life, I really dive into how health and science is represented in the public sphere, and when I started this research, which was decades ago, believe it or not, it wasn't really that much of a hot topic, but holy cow, has it become a hot topic, right? We live in the era of misinformation. It only seems to be accelerating. Now, think of COVID, right? All the misinformation that we're faced with now, right? Yeah. And so that's been my passion. Trying to debunk things, trying to think of ways that we can counter misinformation. But also, I think it's really important to get to listen, right? To get an understanding of why people are drawn to these ideas. People aren't fools, what's drawing them in, and so I'm very curious about that. So I think in the show, I try to experience, what they experience. In the book, I try to do that too. So I think that's important also. So these are the kinds of things that I've become really passionate about. And I think it's also worth reflecting on the reality that this really matters. So some of the topics I tackle are fun. I try to make sure it's fun. But it really does matter. This spread of misinformation, the twisting of science, the fear-mongering, which is a big theme in my new book. It matters, right? It matters how people eat. It matters even farming practices, right? It shapes markets. This is not a little issue. This is a big topic that has an impact on all of us.
Amen. And you know, that is one of the reasons I was super excited to bring you to our audience. We are all farmers, whether we're from Canada, across North America, around the world. But I'm sure you know too, you chat with a lot of agriculture companies and groups, and your work ties in hand with agriculture and how people eat. As farmers, we're in a never-ending battle with consumers and all these false marketing, and we often personally, rightfully or not, feel attacked by consumers, right? And half of us go, well, that's not the truth. And it's just so frustrating. So I'm very excited to bring your work and this book to our audience because it is so relevant to us.
I think you're right. So many of these topics are, as you know from the book, a lot of them are food related, and a lot of them are about myths that people have about food, and sometimes tied to fear mongering associated with food, and it really does have an impact on people's health, on agricultural practices, and I said before on markets. You know, think of gluten. You know, I have a short section on gluten. That's a topic I've been fascinated with for, you know, since the trend started. Yeah. That is still, can you believe that people are still eating gluten-free when they're not, you know, celiac and don't have an intolerance? They think it's healthier, right? But that is a really good example of how misinformation can endure and have this impact. There's a whole bunch of interesting stuff around milk too in the book, as you know, and people's misperceptions about milk in the dairy industry. Yeah, it's frustrating stuff.
Okay, so I think that answers why you wrote the book, really, right there, right? You're passionate about it. You want to debunk that and get a little bit of the truth out there, right?
That's right. And in the latest book, I really wanted to emphasize, you know, how this misinformation and how twisted science and how fear-mongering, you know, impacts our daily life. You know, all those little decisions that we make all day long. As you know, the book is structured around a typical day, my typical day, and all the decisions you make throughout the day. So, you know, it starts with when we wake up. And now I know farmers wake up early, so maybe this doesn't, you guys don't count, right?
That's okay. We get the point.
No, you guys don't count. And then, you know, all the decisions you make from, you know, putting on your clothes and, you know, do you go commando or, you know, and then do you drink coffee and how do you get your kids to school, right to the end of the day when we go to sleep.
I love it. I love it. You know, I read a lot of books and we'll talk about that later, but I was literally captivated with your book. So good job. I know.
Oh, you're so kind. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. It was just captivating. So why don't we roll from right there? And one of the things that you address really early in the book is how many decisions each person makes every day. And we don't often think of it, but there's a lot of things that go into our decision making, right? So
that's right.
Touch on that.
And you know, some people speculate, and I don't know if this how do you quantify this, right? But some people, you know, researchers have speculated that we make thousands of decisions a day. No, a lot of those are unconscious, right? You know, not necessarily something that we, you know, decision that we grapple with, but we do make so many decisions every single day. I don't know if you saw some studies that suggested we make hundreds of food decisions every day, right? Yeah. So how do we make those decisions, right? Now, some of them are made almost intuitively, right? And sometimes they are driven by fear. They are, you know, I argue in the book, sometimes they are driven by misperceptions and misbeliefs. And so I argue that if we can cut through those, we can make clearer decisions. But I also argue in the book that so many of the decisions that we really deliberate on, like, you know, do you let your kids walk to school? You know, how are you going to get to work? We think that we're making an informed decision. We think we're making a decision based on the evidence. And in the book, I try to argue that we aren't always, and worrying about it is stressing us out more than we need to be stressed out about it, right? So, you know, that's one of the really key takeaways here is, you know, hence the title, Relax. you know, so many of these decisions don't need to be as stressful as people think.
Oh, and you know what? I guess maybe I love this book because it was so well written, but also I'm a bit of a keener. and a self-help addict. I call it an addict. You know what? I'm a business owner. I got to learn and improve. But you know what? I often lately look back to, call it 10, 15, 20 years ago. Again, different place in my life, didn't have a business, all that kind of stuff. And I go, man, I lived a lot more and enjoyed a lot more. Ooh, that sounds bad saying that. But with social media and people being able to text you, there's just way too much. It almost seems like all the things we're trying to think of and doing so good in our life, we've kind of taken the living out of life. I'm speaking for myself. Maybe everybody's out there going, Tracy, you're crazy. We know it. But I'm actually COVID. I'm finding the blessing and just starting to live again and like just deconditioning, whatever we want to call it. So your book kind of hit home with that. Long-winded there.
And no, it's a really great point and an important point. And I think the evidence backs up exactly what you're saying. We live in this world that is so frenetic right now, where we carry our job around, with us in our pocket. We can't escape work because it's with us all the time. And there's this really interesting body of evidence to say exactly that. We feel busier than we perhaps even really are because we feel like we always should be working because we always can be doing something. We could be checking email. We could be on social media. And so that input really does make us feel busier than perhaps we even are, and perhaps we're less productive because of it.
I agree. You know what? And your book's at a great time personally in my life, and I imagine probably a lot of people in our audience with how quick everything's moving. So I could really, really relate to a lot of what you were saying. So I think that's a great segue. I want to move into from decision making and all that goes into that to the paradoxes. You talk about 3 paradoxes. Can you dive into those? I really love them. And that kind of builds exactly on what we were just talking about.
Yeah. As I was starting to write this book, and I'd already did a little bit of research on the the content, digging into it. These paradoxes really emerged for me because we live at a strange time, and they are paradoxes. So the first paradox is the knowledge paradox, where you would think we have so much information at our fingertips. We can get it so quickly. You would think that we would be making more informed decisions, right? Ones that are based more on fact, when in fact we aren't. In fact, there's some evidence we're doing the exact opposite. So that's the first paradox. The second paradox is the risk paradox, this idea that we're living in this, horrible world, this dystopian world. It's so risky. When in fact, that's not the case. We're living in the COVID era here, this pandemic. So it may feel like this is a bad time to be saying this. But, if you take that part of the equation out of it, we're living at one of the best times in human history, right? And despite that, we feel like it's horrible. And I mean, as farmers, this, so much of that fear impacts our decisions when, I argue in the book, we shouldn't let it. And the last paradox is the perfection paradox. And this is a paradox that I think impacts all of us. It's this idea, it sounds like you're kind of type A. So this is you and me. Okay.
Okay, good.
This is you and me. This idea that we always have to be striving to be better. And I argue in the book, and I touch on this a little bit in the Gwyneth Paltrow book too. And this is the idea that, this idea that there's this ideal life that we're striving for. And in reality, that's an illusion, right? And this paradox is a little bit of that. The journey is the reality. That's really the journey, not the goal. It's a little bit of that cliche, right? That the conclusion obviously often is illusory. It doesn't really exist, and how you get there is often misinformed too. So, you can think of really basic things like, beauty issues but there's also job issues, career things. All of those things are often presented to us in a way that are inaccurate. This isn't what life is like, but still this striving for perfection is something that drives so many of our decisions.
Yeah. Then that's kind of what I'm in a unique place in my life. And again, I'm calling it the COVID blessing. Find them where you can, right? But
That's right.
maybe when you just slow down a little bit, you have a little more time to think and reflect. And to me, I loved all three of those paradoxes. The knowledge era, like prime example, there are facts on everything. But if I'm not going to go into politics, but I'll just say there is a solid set of facts on what prime minister, what president has done. But yet each side can argue their case clearly based on their hand-picked knowledge, right? There's just too much out there to sift through. If you were in the middle, I'm not going to get political, holy Dinah, but if you were on the middle, right in the middle, and didn't know who to vote for, and you wanted to sift through, let's say you were an American, very relevant right now, and you're like, I don't know who I want to vote for. Good luck trying to sift through and actually figure out what the facts are and what the current president has done, right? I was talking about that the other day. It's overwhelming. How do you make an informed decision on anything?
It really is incredible, and part of it is what you touched on this real briefly. All the biases that we have built in, these confirmation biases. So if you are a hardcore, leaning one direction or the other, I won't say politically which one, you can find something to confirm your belief, right? This confirmation bias is incredibly strong. And the other thing that people do is they pick the facts that fit their ideology, and there's some great agricultural examples here. I'm sure someone like this that says, I can't believe that you don't believe in climate change. I can't believe it. How could you not believe in climate change? That seems ridiculous. But that exact same person will be against GMOs, right? Even though the body of evidence for both of those things is very similar, right? That the scientific consensus about both those things are very similar. But people pick facts that fit their ideology, that fit their kind of personal brand. And that happens a lot in food and agriculture, right? You think of organic, think of GMOs, right? Think of holistic. And now you have even things like this regenerative farming, agriculture and these kinds of things happening. So it's a very interesting, agriculture. I don't want to pick on you guys, but it's a really great example of some of the things I try to tackle in the book.
It is. And, to be honest, as I always am, I'm a farmer. And when we get into some of the facts and figures, geez, I'm even at a loss. Like, I don't know everything of every part of agriculture. I'm a beef farmer. I know what happens in this stage of production of the beef farm. So there is so much out there that sometimes I have some family members that will take their misinformed information and throw it out there. The funny part they'll be sitting there smoking a cigarette.
Yeah, I've had that happen to me. One time I was walking, many times. That's happened to me many times. But my favorite example.
Not safe.
Yeah, GMOs are going to kill you. Gluten. I had the one where I did an interview on CBC, and I was walking down Queen Street in Toronto, and someone came running up yelling at me about how gluten was poisonous for you. And they were smoking, right? But to be fair, people have these risk perceptions, and beef is a really good example of it, right? How the risks associated with it can be spun to fit a particular agenda.
Yeah, it's kind of sad. It makes me really hard. It kind of really can be overwhelming for people, right? And especially with social media, and you're in farming, and they talk about mental health for our audience. Take it right home here. The farmers in our audience, mental health is a big thing. Agriculture and farming is really, really hard to do, right? Because you don't control the weather, so on. You don't control any of the markets. It's very stressful. And now you cannot open any social media app without seeing some garbage against your industry, and it just weighs on you, and it's hard. It is really.
It is interesting because there's this, I'm sure you've heard of doom scrolling, right? This idea, you pick up your phone and it's just bad news after bad news. And this is something else I touch on in the book. We're biologically wired to respond to negative news, the negativity bias it's called. And that's why, negative headlines outperform positive ones. I don't know if you knew that. That's why you see negative headlines more. And it makes biological sense. You could see why we're evolutionarily wired like that, because, for millions of years, you want to respond to the negative stuff. Don't eat that plant, it's bad for you, you're going to die, there's a tiger in the woods. But now in the modern world, that bias can have unintended consequences. And so that's what really happens with this doom scrolling. And there's really interesting work on our current research project where we have found, and Gordon Pennycook, a researcher at the University of Regina, has found that, that people, when they're stressed out, they're less likely to make informed decisions. So that's the other reason I wanted to have this book. We're talking about relax, chill. Evidence tells us that if you do relax, you're more likely to make certain informed decisions. But perhaps even more importantly, and this is Gordon's work, he has found you're less likely to spread misinformation. Right? So if you can just get people to pause, calm down, kind of embrace a culture of accuracy, we're going to be less likely to spread misinformation and make this whole situation worse.
Amen. I love it. Love it. And one last thing, we talked about the perfection paradox too, even where this is hitting home. It's a little bit personal, but at some point you learn and you need to, because as an entrepreneur, there's so many areas of a business. As a farmer, there's so many areas you can improve, but when is enough? And you go, does this actually make me smarter, happier, et cetera, right? I love it.
You're right. And I have to remind myself of that too. This idea that it sounds like a cliche here, yes, but you can't do everything. You can't do everything, and constantly striving to try to do everything. And there is some evidence on this. It wears on you. It really does wear on you. So it's a little bit of that be grateful, idea, right?
Yeah, I loved it. And I your book is amazing, and it's just coming, again, I've said it a few times, just at a perfect time for me. So I'm so excited to be sharing this with our audience too. You're gonna get raving reviews from me, and I'll go onto Amazon and give you one too. Okay, so that's the paradoxes. If you don't have anything else that you want to add, I want to dive into, believe it or not, folks, what we just spoke about is actually only the introduction of the book. All of that good stuff was just like the first 10, 12 pages of the book. That's how much good stuff there is in there. So unless you want to add anything more to that, I just want to get you to touch on the bulk of the book. I know you mentioned it a little bit earlier. What do you go through, and what do you talk about? What could the reader expect from the main part of the book?
So it really is a typical day. It really is. When you wake up, and all the decisions that we make throughout the day, and some of them, as you know, I kind of dive into a little bit in the history of the decision, and what this great body of evidence says about it, and then others are quite short, like a decision about drinking coffee or looking at your phone on the toilet, which a ridiculous number of people do every single morning, right?
Yeah.
And believe it or not, there's actually evidence on that and why it's not a good idea to do that. Having breakfast, how much coffee should you drink, et cetera, et cetera. And I try to break it down. Now, the topics that I picked to cover, I adopted in part because these are things that, I'm lucky that I get to speak to the general public a lot. I get to give a lot of talks, and these are things people wanted to know about their day. So I do try to pick things that I hope people are going to relate to, that they think about during their day. But I also hope you notice this. Some of them are fun topics that still make a point. Do you put the toilet seat up or down? That's you would not believe the number of arguments I got in on that one. But others are more controversial and more serious, right? So I try to mix it up that way too.
I can't. I'm going to just sit here and gush for about 20 minutes, and I don't ever do that. So I love it. And if you guys want to get the book, we'll share how you can find it in just a few minutes. We've gone through the introduction, the bulk of it, why you wrote it, and then what you set out to walk the reader through. What is the main thing that you want to convey to readers? What do you want them to take away from the book?
Number one, we've touched on this already, is the degree to which so much of what we hear is twisted. Yeah. And where you have misinformation, you have twisted science, you have fear mongering, and all these things really do shape our our not only our decisions, but how we feel throughout the day, and the kind of decisions that we make. And I hope that by giving people critical thinking skills and allowing people to reflect on these things, they can at least chill a little bit. And I think that's important, right? I do think that's important. I don't expect that everyone's going to make rational decisions all the time. None of us do, right? I don't, and I don't expect people to. But if they can just get a sense of these forces that are having an adverse impact on their decision making, I hope that they can move to a better place. The other thing is the idea about, and this is so relevant, I think, to agriculture, is the value of focusing on the basics, right? On the basics of a healthy lifestyle, the basics of how to have well-being. There is really no magical solution, despite the fact that so many entities want to force the idea that there are things that we're supposed to be afraid of, and here's the magical solution to that fear. In general, you can ignore all of that and just focus on those basic things that are going to make you happy and healthy.
I have a random off-the-cuff question for you. Answer it if you're comfortable. Pass if you're not. Social media, good or bad?
I won't pass because I think that's a really important question. I don't think it is good or bad. You're probably going to get more than you bargained for.
I want to do this.
I'm going to start from I won't necessarily say the positive, but why we have to be careful about our critique. Every single time there's a new communication technology, people say it's the end of the world, right?
Yeah.
They said that about the printing press.
Yeah.
They said that about books. They said that about the radio. They said that about comics. They wanted to ban comics, right? They said that about movies. They said that about TVs.
Yeah.
Absolutely. They've said that about the internet and home computers. And so I think we need to be careful about our critique. We have to be realistic about the role of technology in our lives and how the social accommodation that occurs. Having said that, I do think that there is a growing body of evidence that talks about the harm that social media and carrying around our phones can do to our lives, right? A great source of information. We've actually done research on this at the Institute. It also can be a source of building communities and et cetera. So those things are valuable. But I do think we need to recognize the impact it's having on spreading misinformation, creating anxiety. For example, there's a study that just came out about body image issues for not just women, but for young men, also facilitated by constantly looking at social media, has an adverse impact on the kinds of food that we eat. We did a study on this ourselves around the context of immune boosting and how that's a bunk idea, right? So I think that we need to negotiate our relationship with social media a little bit better, recognizing the benefits and the harms and how we can move forward. At a minimum, I think we have to remind ourselves to take a break. Every once in a while, I actually try to do this. I really do try to leave my phone in my office when I'm home, so I have to get up to go look at it. Now, COVID has kind of shaken that up a little bit, but I think that's really important, just to take a breather, from that noise.
I'm glad I asked you. Perfect answer. Lately, more and more in my little COVID discovery phase here of my life, I was just having this conversation with somebody and I said, social media, good or bad? And I kind of argued it the same way. It's good because you can connect with people, and again, this is where we need to put the onus on ourselves, right? I'm not forced to look at those apps, right?
Yeah,
I need to be the boss of me, just like I am in everything else, and just shut it off. And I've actually started to pull back. I need to be on there for work because of this show, but I started to pull back a little bit because I realized I was on there, and I finally a little bit of a wake-up call, and you go, do you need to be on there that much? And is this really for work? And is this really productive, Tracy? Right?
You're right. And there's been some really interesting research that has taken place during COVID that has found that getting all that information from social media does increase our stress levels.
Yeah.
It is associated with mental health stresses. That's we have to be careful about correlation, causation studies, but they have found that association. And it's also been found that constantly getting information from social media, you're more likely to believe constantly getting your information from social media, you're more likely to believe misinformation, right? Partly because it's just this chaotic, frenetic information environment, right? It's hard to tease out what's real and not real. So yeah, take a breather. I try to do it at night and maybe a couple times during the day. And I think it really makes a difference.
It does. Yeah. I've been noticing a difference too. Fantastic. I'm so happy I asked you that question. Thank you. So as this episode is airing, it is launch day. If people would like to access copy.
I have a copy.
Oh, yay. If they want to access copies, where can they find it?
Oh, for sure. All the usual spots, all the bookstores, and for sure in Canada on Amazon.ca. It'll be there. And I love the cover. It's always the coffee. I'm a little bit of a coffee addict. I didn't know they were going to do that, so I was kind of thrilled.
Yeah, that's really good. It's a sharp looking cover too.
Yeah.
Okay, that's excellent. And for you guys in the audience, stay tuned because I'm going to be buying several copies from Timothy as a thank you and to just share the love because I just love that book so much. So stay tuned for the contest announcement. And if people want to connect with you on social media, how can they find you? What's your handle?
Twitter's great, and that's at Caulfield Tim. I'm also on Instagram and I'm on Facebook. But we were talking about dialing back. I don't engage that much on Facebook. I just found there's too many places to communicate. But Twitter for sure, and a little bit of Instagram, and they can find me on Facebook.
Perfect. And you know what? We'll actually go and put your links to all your different social media profiles in the show notes here, and links to Amazon where they can buy the book and where they can enter the contest. So that was amazing. Do you have any final parting words that you want to share with our audience before we wrap up?
Oh, well, I'd like to say thank you, and thank you to everything that the agricultural community does. I know this is a tough time for everyone and a tough time for you guys, and I always love engaging with the farming community. You guys are your business people. You're out there in the fields. You have to work with customers. You do it all, and so know that Canadians really do appreciate your community.
Thank you, Timothy. Do you want to tell us all to relax, Dammit?
Yeah, except relax, damn it.
That should be your slogan when you're leaving everybody. See you later and relax, damn it.
Okay.
I love it. Well, thank you for those kind words. Our audience appreciates that. And I cannot say enough about the book. As you know, I appreciate your time. So thank you very much for joining us on the Impact Farming Show. Thank you guys for joining us. Make sure to like it, subscribe, and share this amazing episode so that people can find out about Timothy and his book. See you next week, guys. Bye.
You've been listening to Impact Farming. For more great episodes and articles designed to help you manage and grow your farming operation, head on over to farmmarketer.com. Don't forget to sign up while you're there. We will see you on the next episode.